The silence in the great hall of Ironwood Keep wasn't peaceful. It was the quiet of a tomb just before the stone is sealed shut. Rain wept against the stained glass windows, each drop a hammer blow against the panes. The air, usually crisp with the scent of pine and hearth smoke, was thick with the cloying perfume of southern roses and the sharp metallic tang of fear. King Alden Blackwood, the Alpha of the North, sat upon a throne carved from the heart of a mountain. He was a man built for war, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of a kingdom and eyes the color of a winter sky, gray, stormy, and now utterly clouded with defeat. Before him, on a table of scarred oak, lay a single scroll. It was not just parchment, it was a shroud, the surrender decree. Standing opposite him was a man who was his perfect shadow, his elegant opposite, Silas Vance, Alpha of the Sunfire Pack. Where Alden was rugged stone, Silas was polished marble. His hair was spun gold, his robes silk and gilt, worth more than a northern village saw in a lifetime. Beside him stood his strategist, Lady Ilara, her beauty as cold and precise as a razor. "The terms are more than fair, Alden," Silas purred, his voice like honey laced with hemlock. "You keep your title. We simply manage the resources. Think of the peace it will bring your weary people." Peace. The word tasted like ash in Alden's mouth. This treaty would gut his kingdom. It gave away the silver mines, the fertile valleys, the right to conscript every boy over 16. It would turn his proud people into servants in their own land. 3 years of a losing war had bled them dry. His warriors were dead, his granaries empty, his people hiding in cellars, gnawing on frost-hardened roots. To save them from total slaughter, he had agreed to this. To save them, he had to destroy everything they were. His hand, which had never trembled holding a sword, shook now as it reached for the quill. The feather felt heavier than his broadsword. The inkwell seemed a bottomless pit of darkness. "Come now, your majesty," Silas coaxed, a flicker of impatience in his icy blue eyes. "Let us not drag out the inevitable. Sign, and perhaps I will be generous with the scraps that remain." The nib touched the parchment. A single black blot of ink bloomed on the pristine surface, a dark tear marking the death of the North. "Stop!" The scream was not a roar of defiance, but a raw, desperate cry that tore through the heavy silence. It came not from a general or a lord, but from the shadows near the banquet tables, followed by the deafening crash of a silver tray hitting the stone floor. Goblets shattered, and dark wine spread across the flagstones like a blood stain. Every head swiveled, every eye fixed on the source of the chaos. There, amidst the wreckage of fine crystal and spilled wine, stood a young woman in a drab gray servant's dress. She was slight, almost vanishing into the gloom, her face pale as milk. Her chest heaved, her large hazel eyes wide with terror, and a blazing, unmistakable certainty. Alden froze, his quill poised. He saw her fear, but deeper he saw a fire, a truth. Silas's mask of civility shattered. "You stupid girl," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "Quards, remove this clumsy creature. Flog her for this interruption." 2 of Silas's golden-armored soldiers moved forward, their hands on their sword hilts, but Alden's voice, a low rumble that vibrated in the very stones, halted them. "Wait." He rose from his throne, his immense size casting a long, defiant shadow over the treaty. He looked not at Silas, but at the trembling servant. "You spoke. You said, 'Stop.'" His gaze was intense, compelling. "Why?" The girl, her knees knocking, swallowed hard. The entire court held its breath. She was nothing, an Omega scullery maid, and yet she had stopped the hand of a king. She took a shuddering breath, her eyes darting to the scroll, then back to the king's stormy eyes. "Your Majesty," she whispered, her voice gaining a thread of steel, "the text, line 57, it does not say what he claims it says." Lady Ilara laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "A kitchen maid interprets legal texts now? How desperate you are, Blackwood!" But Alden ignored her. He kept his eyes locked on the girl. "Explain." She pointed a trembling finger at the dense, florid script. "He said it grants rights to the whispering timberlands, but the phrase cor sanguinis in the old tongue of the First Pact, it doesn't mean woodland heart. It means blood heart, the sovereign's bloodline, his heirs." Her voice grew stronger, filled with horrified conviction. "He isn't taking your trees, my king. He is taking your future children. If you sign, any child you ever have becomes his property, to raise as a hostage or dispose of. He isn't just conquering the North, he is erasing it." A thunderous silence fell, then a roar of outrage erupted from the few remaining Northern lords. Alden looked from the girl's earnest, terrified face to Silas Vance. He saw the truth there, a flash of furious, panicked calculation in the other alpha's eyes before the mask slammed back down. "Is this true?" Alden's voice was deathly quiet, more dangerous than any shout. "It is prudent governance, insurance against future rebellion, but it changes nothing. Sign the decree, or my army outside your gates will burn this keep to cinders with you inside. You have no choice." Alden Blackwood looked at the quill in his hand, at the ink-stained decree, at the hope dawning in his people's eyes, and at the girl who had lit it. He saw not just a servant, but a spark in the darkness. With a roar that shook the rafters, he threw aside the quill. "My only choice," he growled, "is to never surrender my family." He grabbed the edge of the heavy oak table and with a surge of raw alpha strength flipped it. The treaty, the ink, the lies went flying towards Silas Vance. Chaos exploded. "Treason!" Lady Ilara shrieked. "Protect the king!" bellowed his commander. In the tumult, Silas Vance scrambled back, his fine robe stained with wine, his eyes locking on the servant girl with pure, undiluted hatred. "Kill her!" he screamed over the din. "Kill that girl first!" A Sunfire soldier lunged, his serrated blade aiming for her heart. The girl, Mira, stumbled back, tripping over her skirts, falling hard on the cold stone. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the end. It never came. A wall of muscle and fury stood over her. Alden Blackwood, his own sword now in hand, parried the blow with a shower of sparks. With a powerful kick, he sent the soldier flying. He turned, reached down and hauled Mira to her feet, his grip firm, anchoring her in the storm. "Behind me," he commanded. He faced Silas, who was being dragged towards the doors by his guards. "Get out of my keep, Vance. The next time we meet, it will be on the battlefield." Silas' face was a mask of fury. "You have signed your own death warrant, Blackwood, and you," he spat, his gaze boring into Mira, "I will remember your face. I will peel it from your bones." The great doors slammed shut, leaving a ringing silence in the wrecked hall. The treaty lay crumpled and wet in a puddle, its poisonous ink bleeding away. Alden stood amidst the ruin, his chest heaving. He had just condemned them all to a siege they could not win. He turned slowly. The girl, Mira, was trying to make herself small again, to vanish into the shadows. But she couldn't. She had changed everything. "Who are you?" Alden asked roughly. "Mira," she whispered. "Mira Thorne."
Thorn, he repeated. A minor, disgraced house. You work in my kitchens.
My father's choices sent me there, Your Majesty, she said, lifting her chin a fraction. But my grandmother was the royal archivist. She taught me the old tongue. She said words were the only weapons they couldn't take from you. Alden studied her, the ink-stained fingers, the intelligent eyes, the defiance in a frame bred for submission. She had saved his bloodline. She had also likely doomed his kingdom. You have a curious way of serving, Mira Thorne, he said, his expression unreadable. You may have just saved my future, or you may have ended my present. Either way, you are now a target. Silas Vance will hunt you for this. He strode to his throne, retrieved a heavy old iron key. He tossed it to her. She caught it, surprised by its weight. You are no longer a scullery maid. From this moment, you are the royal archivist. You will lodge in the East Tower near the library. His tone brooked no argument. Silas used ancient laws as a trap. That means there might be ancient laws we can use as a shield. You found his lie. Now I need you to find me a truth. Find me a way out of this war. Mira clutched the cold iron key. And if I fail, Your Majesty? Alden Blackwood looked at her, then at the distant sounds of the enemy army encamping beyond his walls. Then we will face the end knowing we did not bow. He paused, his storm-gray eyes holding hers. Dawn is in 6 hours. Start digging, archivist. Our fate is in your hands. As 2 guards approached to escort her to her new prison tower, Mira looked back. The Alpha King stood alone in his shattered hall, a solitary mountain against a coming storm. And she, a forgotten girl with a key and a head full of dead languages, was now the only thing standing between him and annihilation. The East Tower was not a room, it was a vertical cavern of forgotten memory. As the heavy oak door swung shut behind Mira, the thud echoed like a tomb ceiling. The guard's retreating footsteps faded, leaving her in a silence so profound she could hear the frantic drum of her own heart. The air was frigid, thick with the scent of dust, crumbling parchment, and the ghost of old leather. Moonlight strained through a single high, narrow window, painting a silver stripe across a landscape of chaos. From the stone floor to the vaulted ceiling lost in shadow, shelves sagged under the weight of books, scrolls, and loose folios. This was the heart of Ironwood's history, and it was dying of neglect. Mira set the single candle she'd been given on a massive reading table carved with wolves. Its light pushed back the darkness just a few feet. She clutched the iron key, its teeth biting into her palm. Find me a way out of this war. The king's command was an impossible mountain. She was one girl, armed only with words her grandmother had whispered by firelight. She approached the nearest shelf, her thin soles whispering on grit. Her fingers traced a spine. Compendium of the Border Pacts, era of the Third Alpha Council. This was it. The language of the treaty was a perversion of this ancient dialect. She pulled the heavy tome, coughing as a cloud of dust erupted. She worked through the night, a small island of light in a sea of darkness. She read of land transfers, mineral rights, and troop deployments. Nothing. No magical clause to disband an army. A cold despair, deeper than the tower's chill, began to seep into her bones. Her father's face, shamed and broken, swam before her eyes. Traitor's blood, they would say. She failed him too. She rested her head on the cool parchment, tears of frustration threatening to fall. Her elbow bumped a protruding shelf support. Thunk. The sound was hollow, wrong. Mira froze. She pushed herself up, feeling along the ornate wooden carving, a twisting vine that seemed out of place among the severe shelves. Her fingers found a knot in the wood that yielded to pressure. With a soft click, a small hidden compartment sprang open. Inside, wrapped in faded blue linen, was a book, not a grand tome, but a personal journal, its cover soft with age. Mira's breath caught. She knew this handwriting. The elegant, looping script was her grandmother's, Ilara Thorne, the last true archivist. With trembling hands she opened it. The date on the first page was from over 20 years ago. The frostfall has come early. The king seeks a precedent for taxing the southern caravans, but my mind is clouded. I have found disturbing references in the oldest scrolls. The cor sanguinis clause. It is not mere law. It is older. It is a curse from the time of the first schism, a blood magic woven into legal form. The Vance line has always coveted not just land, but lineage. They seek to own the future. Mira's blood turned to ice. She flipped pages frantically. The curse is potent but flawed. It views the alpha as a solitary peak. It cannot grasp a bonded pair, a dyad. The land itself rejects the external claim if the alpha's heart is tethered by the moon's grace. The sovereign's heart must be shared to be protected. Her grandmother's notes grew frantic, almost illegible. He must not know. He would see it as weakness, but it is the only shield, the right partner, an omega of untainted spirit, of humble station but noble intent, a keeper of hearths and truths. Mira slammed the journal shut, her heart hammering against her ribs. The loophole wasn't a law, it was a marriage, a sacred, binding, soul-deep union performed under the old rites. If King Alden was married, truly magically married before signing, the custody clause would shatter. The solution was absurd, impossible, and it pointed a terrifying, direct finger at her. Omega, humble station, keeper of truths. The moonlight through the window seemed to accuse her. A sound broke her paralysis, not from the door, but from the window, a faint scrape of stone on stone. She blew out her candle, plunging the tower into near darkness. Silhouetted against the moonlit sky, a figure was pulling itself onto the narrow window ledge from the outside, an impossible climb up the sheer tower wall. Mira stifled a scream, scrambling back behind the reading table. The intruder dropped into the room with a soft thud, moving like a predator's silence. Not a guard, an assassin. Silas Vance had not waited for dawn. The assassin was a shadow given form, dressed in close-fitting, non-reflective gray. She could see the glint of a slender blade in the moonlight. He paused, head tilting, listening. He knew she was here. Her mind raced. There was no lock on the inside of the door, no weapon but books. The key was heavy in her hand. It was a pitiful tool. She crouched lower, her breath a ragged whisper in her throat. The intruder took a step, then another, his boots making no sound on the dusty stone. He was between her and the door. Her eyes darted to the shelves. With a desperate, silent prayer, she reached out and shoved with all her might against a leaning stack of heavy folios. They teetered for an agonizing second before crashing down in a thunderous wave of paper and wood right behind the assassin. He spun towards the noise, blade raised. It was the distraction she needed. Mira erupting from behind the table, not towards the door, but deeper into the maze of shelves. She weaved through the narrow corridors of knowledge, her gray dress blending with the shadows. She could hear him giving chase now, a soft, swift rustle. She ducked behind a massive stone pillar supporting the shelves. Her grandmother's journal was still clutched to her chest. The assassin's footsteps halted. He was listening again. "Little bird," a smooth, cold voice echoed in the dark. It was not the voice of a brute. It was educated, chilling. "Your master wishes to speak with you. Come out, and your death will be quick. Resist, and I will take you back in pieces."
Mira pressed her back against the cold stone. She thought of the king's storm-gray eyes, of the hope in the hall. She was not just Mira the servant anymore. She was the archivist, and this was her library. She took a deep, quiet breath. "Your master," she called out in the dark, her voice surprisingly steady. "Your master relies on tricks and hidden words. Does he fear the light of truth so much he must send a rat to gnaw at it in the dark?" A moment of stunned silence, then a low chuckle. "Clever. It will make breaking you more interesting." She heard him move, gauging her direction. She slipped away, her fingers trailing the shelves. She needed a plan, not just panic. She remembered a layout of the lower floors she'd once seen, a servant's passage for moving firewood, accessed behind a tapestry in the lower stacks. If she could reach the lower level. She moved as fast as she dared, finding the spiral.
Mira threw herself sideways. The blade sparked against the stone where she had been. She scrambled backwards, tripping over a rolled carpet, falling hard. He stood over her, the tip of his blade hovering at her throat. "Any last words for your king, little scribe?" Suddenly a new voice cut through the darkness, sharp as a whip crack. Yes, she would say thank you for the timely arrival. The assassin whirled. Framed in the doorway to the main stairs was not King Alden, but a woman. She was tall, clad in practical leathers, her dark hair braided tightly back. Her eyes, the same storm gray as the king's, blazed with fury. In her hand was a notched and well-used hunting knife. Princess Lyra Blackwood, the king's sister. "This one's mine, Lyra," a deeper voice growled from the shadows behind her. King Alden stepped into the dim light, his face a mask of cold rage. He held no sword, but his clenched fists looked weapon enough. The assassin's eyes darted between the two Blackwoods. His mission had failed. In a flash of movement, he threw a small ceramic sphere at the floor. It shattered, filling the room with a blinding, acrid smoke. Mira coughed, her eyes stinging. She heard a scuffle, a curse from Lyra, and the sound of running footsteps fleeing up the stairs and out the main tower door. When the smoke cleared, Alden was crouched beside Mira, his large hand on her shoulder. "Are you hurt?" She could only shake her head, trembling from head to toe. Lyra stood at the door, peering out. "He's gone, knew the castle routes, a professional." Alden helped Mira to her feet. His gaze fell on the journal still locked in her white-knuckled grip. "You found something, and it seems Silas feared you would." Mira looked from the king's concerned face to Lyra's suspicious, guarded one. She had the answer that could save them, but speaking it aloud would change everything, forever. The king's private council room was a stark contrast to the dusty archive. A fire crackled in a great hearth, and the walls were hung with maps of the north. But the warmth didn't reach Mira. She stood before the heavy table, King Alden on one side, Princess Lyra on the other. The journal lay between them like an accusation. "Explain," Princess Lyra commanded, her arms crossed. "My brother says you have a solution, from a children's story about moon graces and bonding while an army sits at our gates?" "Lyra," Alden warned, his voice low. Princess Lyra stood rigidly by the door, her expression a battlefield of loyalty, frustration, and dread. She had not spoken to Mira since the courtyard. High Priest Ryalan, an ancient man with eyes like milky quartz, moved slowly, arranging a chalice of water, a basin of salt, and a simple silver knife on the altar. His hands were gnarled but steady. "The right of the moon's grace is not a contract," the old priest intoned, his voice surprisingly strong. "It is a weaving. It takes two separate threads and spins them into one unbreakable cord. There is no undoing it. Your joys will be shared. Your pains will be doubled. Your souls will speak to one another in the silence. Do you understand the weight you approach?"
Before either could answer, the heavy door groaned open. King Alden entered. He too wore simple clothes, dark trousers and a linen shirt, the garb of a warrior, not a bridegroom. His storm-gray eyes found Mira's, and for a fleeting second she saw the same terrifying vulnerability she felt. "We understand," Alden said, his voice echoing softly in the chamber. "Then stand before the altar," Ryalan instructed. Mira and Alden moved to stand facing each other, the cold stone of the altar between them. The priest took the silver knife. "Blood is the life. Life is the bond." With a swift, practiced motion, he drew the tip across Alden's palm. The king didn't flinch. Then he did the same to Mira. A sharp sting, a bead of crimson welling up. Ryalan took their hands and pressed their wounded palms together. The contact was electric. Mira's breath hitched. It wasn't pain, it was a shock of awareness, like touching a lightning bolt wrapped in velvet. She felt the rough calluses of his hand, the immense strength held in check, and beneath it a torrent of emotion, a crushing responsibility, a fierce protectiveness, a profound loneliness that mirrored her own. "Now speak the vow," Ryalan whispered. "Look into each other's eyes and speak the truth of your intent." Alden's gaze held hers, intense and unwavering. "I, Alden, of House Blackwood, offer you my strength as your shelter. I offer you my will as your sword. Where my soul walks, yours shall have a path. I bind my life to your light." The words were not romantic. They were a pledge of service, of guardianship. They shook Mira to her core. She took a trembling breath, feeling the truth of her own words rise from a place she didn't know she had. "I, Mira, of House Thorn, offer you my truth as your guide. I offer you my stillness as your anchor. Where your strength falters, my faith will hold. I bind my life to your duty." As the last word left her lips, the world disappeared. A silent, blinding wave of energy erupted from their joined hands. Mira saw not with her eyes, but with herself. She felt the jagged scar on Alden's shoulder from a long-ago battle, the constant ache of hunger in the castle guards, the stubborn, unyielding love he had for his sister and his people. It was overwhelming, a flood of another person's essence, and she knew with absolute certainty that he was experiencing her own flood, the scent of old books, the sting of her father's disgrace, the quiet, stubborn hope she nurtured like a secret flame. The physical world snapped back. They were still in the chapel, their hands still clasped, but everything was different. The silver knife on the altar had a faint glow, the salt in the basin seemed to shimmer, and on their joined palms, where the cuts had been, was now a single delicate silver scar in the shape of interlocking crescents, the mark of the dyad. It didn't hurt, it hummed with a soft, warm energy. Lyra made a small, choked sound from the doorway. Ryalan bowed his head. "It is done. The moon has granted her grace. You are no longer two. You are one heart in two bodies. The land knows it." Alden slowly, carefully released Mira's hand. The connection lessened from a roaring river to a steady, quiet stream in the back of her mind. He was there. She could feel his presence, a steady, solid warmth beside her own consciousness. She looked down at the silver scar on his palm, then at hers. His expression was unreadable, a tumult of awe, shock, and grim determination. "There is no going back," he said, and it was not a question. "No," Mira whispered, cradling her marked hand. A pounding on the chapel door broke the sacred silence. A guard's voice, strained with urgency, called through the wood. "Your Majesty, the Sunfire Envoy is at the main gate. Alpha Vance demands your immediate audience. He says the time for games is over." Alden's head lifted, the king slamming back into place over the stunned man. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a hardened resolve. He looked at Mira, his bonded queen, then at the door where his enemy waited. "Then let us end this game," he said, his voice the cold steel of a drawn blade. "Come, my queen, it is time to show Silas Vance that the heart of the North is no longer his to claim." The walk from the subterranean chapel to the sunlit great hall felt like crossing between two worlds. The humming warmth of the bond in Mira's palm was a stark contrast to the icy dread pooling in her stomach. She was a queen. The word rang hollow and terrifying in her mind. She had no crown, no retinue, only a silver scar and the towering silent presence of the king beside her. Princess Lyra followed a few paces behind, her disapproval a cold shadow at their backs. They did not go to the ruined main hall. Instead, Alden led them to the king's solar, a slightly less cavernous room lined with maps and lit by a wall of narrow windows. The noon sun streamed in, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. It felt too calm, too ordinary for what was about to happen. "Lyra," Alden said, his voice tight, "the marriage document from the priest and the original treaty of surrender. Bring them both." Lyra's jaw tightened, but she obeyed, leaving with a swirl of her cloak. Alone with him, the silence was deafening. Mira could feel the turbulent energy radiating from Alden, a storm held behind a dam of will. She clasped her hands, the silver scar pulsing softly. "When he enters," Alden began, not looking at her, staring out at the besieged valley, "you will stand at my right hand. You will say nothing unless I bid you to. Silas is a serpent. He will try to twist your words, to target you. The bond, it is new. It may be unstable. We must present a unified front, an unbreakable fact." His words were strategy, but beneath them, through the strange new connection, Mira felt it, a fierce protective urge so strong it stole her breath. It wasn't about politics, it was an instinct deeper than thought. Keep her safe. "I understand," Mira said softly. "I will be your anchor." She used the word from her vow, and she saw his shoulders tense slightly. He gave a curt nod. Lyra returned, carrying a leather tube and the now dried, stained surrender decree. She placed them on the table with a thud. "The priest is ready to witness. The guards are in position. He's brought 20 men into the courtyard. Ilara is with him." Alden finally turned from the window. The transformation was complete. The man who had shared his soul moments ago was gone, replaced by the Alpha King, his face a mask of impassive authority. He picked up the leather tube, handing it not to Lyra, but to Mira. "You hold this. It is your shield as much as mine." The weight of the parchment inside felt immense. Just then, a strange sensation bloomed in Mira's mind, not her own. A sharp, focused anxiety, an image of the castle's eastern wall, a lingering scent of rotten roses. She gasped, her hand flying to her temple. Alden was at her side in an instant, his hand on her arm. "What is it?" You're worried about the eastern wall. There's a weak point there, and you smell his perfume." She looked up at him, bewildered. "I saw it, in my mind." A look of shock passed over his face, quickly controlled. Lyra stared, her suspicion momentarily eclipsed by awe. "The bond? It's already that strong?" she murmured. "It seems the moon's grace does not dawdle," Alden said, his voice low. He searched Mira's face. "Can you feel anything else from me?" She concentrated, letting the strange new sense open. She felt his rock-solid determination, his calculated focus on the coming confrontation, and beneath it all a profound respect for what she had just experienced. "You're not afraid. You're resolved.
And you believe this will work?" He held her gaze for a long moment, a silent communication passing between them that needed no words. "Good," he finally said. "Then we are ready." The great hall had been hastily righted, the broken table removed. Silas Vance stood in the center, impeccably dressed, a smirk playing on his lips. Lady Alara stood beside him, her eyes like chips of flint. 20 Sunfire guards lined the walls, outnumbering the ironwood sentries. "Alden," Silas greeted, his voice oily smooth, "I trust you have spent a productive morning reflecting on the wisdom of peace." His eyes flicked to Mira, standing rigidly at Alden's right. His smirk widened. "And you've brought your pet scribe to read the fine print to you one last time?" "The only thing to be read today, Silas, is this." Alden's voice cut through the hall. He made no move to sit on his throne. He remained standing, a pillar of defiance. "You have come for my signature. It is here." He gestured to the stained decree on a small table beside him. Silas's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Finally, reason prevails. Bring it." "But first," Alden continued, his tone dropping, becoming lethally quiet, "there is a matter of clarification. Clause 17, the cor sanguinis. You assured me it pertained to the Whispering Timberlands." Silas waved a dismissive hand. "Legal semantics, Alden. Surely we are past this." "We are," Alden agreed, "because the clause is void." The hall went still. Silas's smile froze. "Void? By what authority? You have no queen, no bonded mate. The clause is specific. The sovereign stands alone." "He did," a new voice said, clear and resonant. Every head turned to Mira. Heart hammering, she stepped forward, holding up the leather tube. She willed her voice not to shake, channeling the steady resolve she felt flowing from Alden through the bond. "At dawn, he stood alone, but the sun moves across the sky, Alpha Vance." She withdrew the marriage document, the fresh ink glistening, the seals of the high priest and the house of Blackwood prominent. "By the ancient rite of the moon's grace, witnessed by the stars and sealed in blood, Alden Blackwood is bound. He is no longer a solitary peak. He is one half of the dyad. The sovereign heart belongs to the union. Your claim is rejected by the oldest law of this land." She unrolled the document, holding it high for all to see. A murmur rippled through the ironwood guards. Lyra, standing stiffly nearby, gave the smallest, most reluctant nod of confirmation. Silas Vance's face underwent a horrifying transformation. The polished charm melted away, revealing raw, seething fury. He snatched the document from a guard who took it from Mira, his eyes scanning the words. He saw the names: Alden Blackwood, Mira Thorne. He saw the priest's seal. He saw the specific invocation of the moon's grace. This is a farce," he spat, the paper crumpling in his fist. "A sham marriage to a kitchen wench. You expect me to believe this? You expect the world to believe this?" "The world does not need to believe," Alden said, his voice rolling like thunder. "The land believes. The magic believes. Look at our hands." At his nod, both he and Mira raised their right hands, palms out. The silver interlocking crescent scars caught the light, glowing with that faint, undeniable inner luminescence. A collective gasp went up. Even the Sunfire guards shuffled uneasily. The mark of the dyad was legend. It could not be forged. Lady Alara's sharp eyes narrowed to slits. A clever trick, a glamour. "Test it," Mira challenged, surprising herself. She looked directly at Alara. "Your master knows the old ways. Have him try to invoke the cor sanguinis clause now. Have him feel the land's rejection." Silas was trembling with rage. The perfect trap, sprung by a nobody. He had the military victory, but the ultimate prize, the Blackwood line, had just slipped through his fingers, protected by a mystical technicality and a girl in a woolen tunic. "You think this changes anything?"
he hissed, throwing the marriage document to the floor. "You are still surrounded. Your people are still starving. I will still burn Thistlebrook to the ground for your impudence." Alden took a step forward, his alpha power flooding the room, a palpable pressure. "If you burn a single cottage, Silas, you are no longer a conqueror abiding by a treaty. You are a war criminal violating a solemn pact. Every neutral kingdom from here to the South Sea will turn on you. Your allies will desert you. You will win this barren rock and inherit the hatred of the continent." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. "Sign the amended treaty, the one that grants you only the mines and timber, not my blood, and leave with some shred of honor, or attack and become an outcast king of ashes. The choice is yours." The standoff crackled in the air. Silas Vance looked from Alden's unyielding face to Mira's defiant one, to the glowing marks on their hands. He saw the truth in the eyes of his own men, superstition and doubt. He had been outmaneuvered not on the battlefield, but in the realm of symbol and soul. A muscle twitched in his jaw. With a sound of pure venom, he snarled, "This isn't over, Blackwood. You've bought yourself a reprieve, not a peace." He spun on his heel. "We withdraw for now." As the Sunfire delegation stalked out the hall, a different kind of tension filled the room, the fragile, dizzying tension of a victory snatched from the jaws of doom. The guards remained at attention, but their shoulders relaxed a fraction. Alden did not move until the great doors boomed shut. Then the rigid strength seemed to seep from him. He looked at Mira, and in his eyes she saw the exhausted man beneath the king. "You were magnificent," he said, so soft only she could hear. But as the relief began to bloom in Mira's chest, a new sharp spike of alarm shot through the bond. Not from Alden this time. It was from Lyra. Mira turned to see the princess staring at a young, breathless messenger who had just dashed into the hall, his face etched with panic. He ran not to the king, but straight to Lyra, whispering urgently in her ear. Lyra's face went pale. She looked at her brother, then at Mira, her earlier suspicion now fused with a new, cold horror. "Alden," Lyra said, her voice hollow. "The messenger, he comes from the eastern gate." She paused, the words seeming to choke her. "They've captured a man trying to flee the castle. He was carrying a coded message, addressed to Silas Vance." Her gaze, heavy with accusation, locked on Mira. "He says he's your father." The world tilted. The solid stone floor beneath her feet seemed to turn to shifting sand. The warmth of the bond in her palm turned icy cold. Her father, here, now, a spy. "Where is he?" Alden's voice was like cracking ice. "The guardhouse by the east gate," the messenger stammered. "He was found in a drainage tunnel, half drowned. He had a silver Sunfire token on him, and this." The boy held out a small wax-sealed cylinder. Alden took it, broke the seal, and unrolled a tiny scroll covered in a complex cipher. His eyes scanned it, his expression growing grimmer with each passing second. He didn't need to read it all. The proof was in the possession, in the attempt to flee to the enemy. "Bring him to the West Tower cell," Alden commanded, his voice devoid of all emotion. "No one is to speak to him." He finally looked at Mira. The connection between them was now a tangled knot of shock, betrayal, and his own dawning, terrible doubt. "You will come with me." It was not a request. Lyra fell into step behind them, a silent, grim sentinel. The walk through the keep was a nightmare. Servants and guards bowed as the king passed, but their eyes lingered on Mira, their new queen. Whispers trailed in their wake, the words, "traitor's blood," slithering through the corridors like poison. The West Tower cell was not a dungeon, but a sparse, cold room used for confining high-status prisoners. The man sitting on the narrow cot was a ghost from Mira's past. Ronan Thorne was a shell of the proud lord she remembered. His clothes were muddy and torn, his face gaunt and etched with lines of fear and shame. But his eyes, when they lifted, were the same hazel as her own. "Mira?" he whispered, his voice raspy. "Silence," Alden barked, standing in the doorway, a formidable barrier of wrath. "You will explain yourself, now." Ronan flinched, his eyes darting between the furious king and his daughter. I had to come. I heard what happened in the hall. I heard she stopped the signing. She's in danger, terrible danger, because of me." "Because you were selling our patrol routes to Vance for the last 3 years?" Lyra spat from behind Alden. "We deciphered the old messages. We know it was you." Ronan hung his head. "Yes, I was. I was a coward. I thought if I gave him what he wanted, he would spare our lands, spare my family." He looked up at Mira, tears in his eyes. "But I was wrong. He uses information and then discards the source. When I heard he was here, when I heard my daughter had defied him, I knew he would kill her. I tried to get a message to him, to bargain, to offer myself in her place, to tell him she knew nothing." "A touching tale," Alden said, his tone glacial. "You are caught with a fresh cipher, fleeing to the enemy camp after a major strategic setback for them. This looks less like paternal concern and more like delivering new intelligence. Did he come to tell you about the marriage? About the bond?" The accusation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Mira felt the blow as if it were physical. She looked at her father's desperate face, at the king's hardened one. The bond between them was screaming with conflict, her own heartbreak and confusion clashing against his wall of defensive logical suspicion. "I didn't know about the marriage," cried Ronan. "I swear it on my life. I came to beg for her life. Alden, please, she is innocent. My sins are my own. Do not let my blood taint her. She is the best of us." "Your pleas mean nothing," Alden said, but his eyes flickered at Mira. She was standing perfectly still, a statue of anguish. He could feel it through the bond, a devastating sorrow, a crumbling sense of identity. She had offered him everything, and now her world was collapsing. "Then take my life," Ronan shouted, surging to his feet only to be shoved back by a guard. "Execute me for treason. Let the world see it. But believe her. She saved you. She is bonded to you. Can you not feel her truth?" That was the question that shattered Alden's icy composure. He could feel it. Beneath the whirlpool of hurt and shock radiating from Mira, there was a core of pure, steadfast honesty. It was the same light he had sensed in the chapel. It had not changed. But the evidence, the timing, the deadly coincidence of it all. "The bond can be manipulated," Lyra said quietly, her voice pained. She was not being cruel, she was being the strategist her brother needed. If she was part of this from the beginning, if this was all a deeper plot to get her next to you, the bond itself could be a trick, a magical sleight of hand. Myra finally spoke, her voice a broken thread of sound. "You think all of this was a plot? That I knew my father would be here? That I would undergo the moon's grace as a deception?" The sheer absurdity of it gave her words a sharp edge. "You felt it, Alden. Was that a trick?" He had no answer. The mystical experience had been the most real thing he had ever known. But a king could not rule on feeling alone. He ruled on evidence, on security. "You both will be confined," Alden declared, the words seeming to ash in his mouth. "Ronan Thorne remains here. Mira, you will return to the East Tower archives. You will be guarded. You will have until tomorrow to find any evidence, any proof at all that can verify your story or your father's intentions. Not from ancient journals, from today, a witness, a second message, anything. It was a death sentence of trust. Mira looked at him, and the connection between them stretched thin, ready to snap. The shield she had become was now seen as a potential weapon turned inward. "And if I find none?" she asked, her eyes dry and burning. Alden held her gaze, the storm in his eyes now one of genuine torment. He could feel her innocence, but the fate of a kingdom hinged on a balance of trust and evidence. "Then at dawn, I will have to decide what to do with a traitor and his queen." He turned and left, Lyra casting one last complicated look at Mira before following. The guard led Mira away, not back to the king's wing, but back to the tower of dust and truth. As the door locked behind her, she slid to the floor, the weight of it all crushing her. The bond in her palm felt like a brand. Her father was a traitor. Her husband believed she might be one too. And outside, Silas Vance still waited, his threat merely delayed. Alone in the darkness, Mira did the only thing she knew how to do. She stood up, wiped her eyes, and walked to the shelves. She was the archivist. Her kingdom was truth, and she had until dawn to unearth it. The archives at night were a different beast. The friendly, dusty silence of daytime research was gone, replaced by a watchful, oppressive gloom. Every shuffle of parchment sounded like a lurking footstep. The single candle guttered, making the shadows of the bookshelves dance like giants. Mira worked not with hope, but with a desperate, focused frenzy. She had to think like her father, like a desperate man trying to protect her child. He said he was trying to send a message to bargain. Would he have kept a copy? A draft? He was a lord, accustomed to secretaries. He might have written it himself. If he came through the drainage tunnel, where did he enter the castle? The old spring cellar? That area was near the abandoned servants' quarters from before the west wing was built. Ignoring the ache in her heart, she forced herself into the mindset of an investigator. She left the main archive and descended into the lower, older levels she had fled through during the assassin's attack. She moved quietly, her senses heightened by fear and the strange, muted awareness of Alden's distant, troubled presence in the back of her mind. The old servants' quarters were a maze of small, empty rooms filled with broken furniture and cobwebs. The air was damp and still. She searched for an hour, finding nothing but dust and decay. Despair began to claw at her again. This was futile. As she turned to leave a small windowless chamber that might have been a pantry, her foot caught on a loose flagstone. She stumbled, her candle falling and extinguishing, plunging her into utter blackness. Panic surged, but as her eyes adjusted, she saw a faint, thin line of grayish light along one wall. Not daylight, torchlight from a corridor seeping through a crack. She felt along the wall. It wasn't solid stone, but old, dry wooden paneling, warped with age. She pushed against it. With a groan of protest, a section swung inward, revealing a narrow, hidden passage, a servant's spy hole from a forgotten era. And there, on the dusty floor of the passage, as if dropped in haste, was a small, folded square of cheap parchment. Mira snatched it up, her hands trembling. She couldn't read it in the dark. She retreated back to the main archive level, relit her candle with shaking hands, and smoothed the note open. The handwriting was her father's, frantic and splattered with what looked like water stains or tears. To the Sunfire Commander, I have nothing left to trade but my own neck. My daughter Mira knows nothing of my past dealings. She acts out of a foolish, brave heart. Do not harm her for my crimes. I will present myself at the east drainage grate at moonrise. Take me instead. Let my death satisfy Vance's wrath. She is just a girl. R.T.
It was a draft, a plea for a prisoner exchange, himself for her. It spoke of a specific plan, the east drainage grate, moonrise.
It wasn't a cipher full of military secrets, it was the desperate, clumsy bargain of a broken man. This was her proof, but it was also a dagger to the soul. Her father had been willing to die for her. The weight of his love and his failure settled on her, a bittersweet burden. Just as the relief began to soften the edges of her panic, a new sensation trickled through the bond from Alden. Not suspicion, not anger. This was different. A sharp, physical pain, followed by a wave of dizziness and confusion that was not her own. Then a spike of alarm so intense it made her gasp. Lyra's alarm felt through the bond. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, and it was happening now. Mira didn't hesitate. She clutched the note and ran to the tower door, pounding on it. "Guard, open this door! I must see the king immediately! It's an emergency!" The guard outside grumbled, but after a moment the lock turned. "The king is not to be disturbed. He's retired for the night." "He's in pain. Can't you feel it?" Mira cried, realizing the guard couldn't feel the bond. "Something has happened to him. Please, take me to his chambers or take me to Princess Lyra." The guard, unsettled by her raw urgency and her new title, finally nodded. "To the princess. She's in the war room." They hurried through the silent keep. As they neared the war room, they found chaos. Guards were running. Lyra's voice, tight with command, echoed from within. "Search every corridor. Check the kitchens. He cannot have gone far." Mira burst in. Lyra and the castle's head healer were bent over a map. Lyra looked up, her face pale. "You! What are you doing here?" "What happened?" Mira demanded, ignoring the hostility. "I felt it, through the bond. Alden is hurt, dizzy." Lyra's eyes widened in shock. The healer, an old woman named Agnes, answered. "Alden collapsed in his chambers. He was weak, disoriented, his pulse thready. We got him to bed. It's not a wound. It's like a sickness, but it came on in moments." "Poison," Lyra said, the word a death knell. Mira's blood ran cold. Her proof forgotten for a moment, she pushed past them towards Alden's chambers. The guards at the door, recognizing her, let her through. Alden lay in his large bed, looking terrifyingly vulnerable. His skin was pale, a sheen of sweat on his brow. His eyes were closed, but as she approached, they fluttered open. The stormy gray was clouded with pain and fog. "Mira?" he whispered. The connection between them was a thin, pained thread, but in his weakness, his mental walls were down. She didn't just feel his physical distress, she felt his thoughts, swirling and slow. The wine, the last thing, only one cup, from the caravan on the sideboard. "The wine," Mira said aloud, turning to Lyra and Agnes, who had followed. "He thinks it was the wine in his chambers." Lyra's face hardened. "He drank alone tonight, after the cell." She couldn't look at Mira. The unspoken accusation hung in the air. Who had access? Who would want him weakened or dead now? Mira understood. With Alden ill or dead, the newly bonded queen, the traitor's daughter, would be the perfect scapegoat. The bond might even kill her if he died, tying up all loose ends neatly for whoever did this. But feeling his pain, feeling the fraying of their precious, fragile connection, ignited a fury in Mira she never knew she possessed. She was his shield, and a shield did not break when struck. It stood firm. "It wasn't me," she said, her voice low and fierce, "and I can prove part of that later, but right now we need to find out who did, and we need to save him." She looked at the healer. "What do you need?" Agnes nodded, respect flickering in her eyes. "Lily root tea to purge the poison, fresh snow moss from the north wall to cool the fever. Quickly." "I'll get the moss," Lyra said, already moving to the door. She paused, looking back at Mira. For the first time her gaze held not suspicion, but a desperate shared fear. Don't let him die. Alone with him, Mira sat on the edge of the bed, taking his hot, limp hand in hers. The silver scars touched. A faint pulse of warmth flowed between them, cutting through the poison's chill. His eyes focused on her a little more. "The note, my father," she began. "Later," he breathed, his fingers tightening weakly around hers. The bond carried his thought more clearly than his voice. "Trust is a choice. I am choosing." He was too weak to uphold his walls of kingly doubt. All that was left was the raw connection, and within it he believed her. Tears finally spilled down Mira's cheeks. In the darkness, with death whispering at the door, their alliance was finally truly forged, not just of magic, but of choice. She would be his shield, and he, in his vulnerability, had become hers. The night became a blur of frantic activity. Lyra returned with the rare grayish snow moss that grew in the highest, coldest shadows of the north-facing wall. Agnes prepared the bitter lily root tea. Mira helped prop Alden up, her small hands supporting his broad shoulders, and helped him drink the foul-smelling brew. He retched, purging the poison, and slipped into a fitful but deeper sleep, his vital signs slowly stabilizing. While Agnes kept vigil, Lyra pulled Mira into the antechamber. The princess's face was grim in the torchlight. The wine carafe was empty, the cup was clean. Whoever did this was careful, but a guard saw someone leaving the royal wing late night, a servant carrying a linen basket. He didn't recognize the face, thought it was a new girl from the kitchens. "A disguise," Mira murmured. Her mind, trained for patterns, raced. This wasn't to kill him, not outright. A deadly poison would have been faster, harder to trace. This was to weaken him, to incapacitate the king at a critical moment. Why? Lyra's eyes met hers, the same realization dawning. Silas. He withdrew, but he didn't break camp. He's still out there. If the king is seen as weak, or if chaos erupts inside the keep, the treaty becomes meaningless. He can claim we violated it by failing to maintain order, or that Alden is unfit to rule. Mira finished the thought. And with the king ill and the new queen under suspicion of treason and possibly poisoned him, the castle would be divided. It would be the perfect time to attack. "We have a traitor inside Ironwood," Lyra said, the words tasting like gall. Mira remembered the note in her pocket. She pulled it out and handed it to Lyra. "This is what I found, my father's draft. He came to bargain for my life, not to sell secrets." Lyra read it quickly, her expression shifting from skepticism to pained understanding. A fool, but a father. She handed it back. "This doesn't clear his past, but it explains tonight. I will have the East Grate watched at moonrise, in case any of Vance's men try to make contact." "I misjudged you," she sighed, running her hand over her face. "The bond, it's real, and I felt his trust for you when he was too weak to hide it. I'm sorry." The apology was blunt, but sincere. It was a bridge. "We don't have time for regrets," Mira said, though she accepted it with a nod. "We have to find the real poisoner, and we have to make sure Silas doesn't get the signal that his plan is working." "What do you propose, Archivist?" Lyra asked, and the title was now one of respect. Mira thought. The servant was seen with a linen basket. That means they likely came from, or were pretending to come from, the laundry or the linen stores. Those are in the lower west wing, near the old kitchens. It's also— She trailed off, her blood going cold. "It's also near the West Tower cells," Lyra finished, her eyes sharpening. Could it be a coincidence, or was the poisoner trying to frame Ronan further? Or was there a connection? Mira's father had been a traitor for Vance. Did he have an accomplice inside the castle he never mentioned? Someone who was still active? "We need to question him now," Mira said. Lyra agreed. Under heavy guard, they descended to the West Tower cell. Ronan Thorne was awake, sitting in the dark.
He looked up, hope and fear warring on his face as he saw Mira. "Father," Mira said, kneeling before the cell bars, showing him the note. "We found this. We believe you." Tears welled in his eyes again. "Thank you," he choked out. "But someone tried to poison the king tonight. A servant was seen near his chambers. The trail leads near here. Did you work with anyone else inside the castle? A contact? A handler?" Ronan's face went blank with shock, then crumpled in despair. No, I worked alone. I sent messages by blind drops. I never met anyone. Vance wouldn't risk that." He looked desperately at Mira. "You have to believe me. I've told you all my sins. I have no more secrets." Mira believed him. The utter wreckage of his spirit felt true through her own empathic senses, now heightened by the bond. But if not him, then who? Someone acting on their own? A fanatical loyalist to Vance planted years ago? As they turned to leave, Ronan called out, weakly, "Mira, the old ways, the poison. If it was lily fever, it's slow. It causes confusion, weakness for days. It's made from the crushed petals of the white frost lily. They don't grow here. They're a southern flower, prized in Sunfire Gardens." A southern flower. That narrowed nothing and everything. It pointed squarely at Vance, but anyone could have obtained it. Back in the war room, as the first gray light of pre-dawn touched the sky, Lyra and Mira plotted. "We must present strength. Alden cannot appear in public today, but you can." "Me?" Mira asked. "You are the queen. The bond is visible, public. You must hold court. You must meet with the stewards, be seen by the guards, project calm and control. We will say the king is in deep strategic planning. Meanwhile, I will have my most trusted men scour the servant rolls, look for new faces, inconsistencies." The idea of facing the court, a sea of suspicious faces without Alden's solid presence beside her, terrified Mira. But she felt the flicker of his sleeping strength through the bond, a steady ember in the dark. She was not alone. "I will do it," Mira said. Just then, a sentry rushed in. "Princess, a force from the Sunfire camp is approaching the gates. Not the whole army, a contingent of about 50. They bear a white parley flag, but they are armed for battle." Lyra and Mira exchanged a look. This was it, the test. Silas was probing the wound. "Sound the alert, man the walls, but do not fire," Lyra commanded. She looked at Mira. "Your first audience as queen, Mira Blackwood. Let's go and show the serpent that the heart of the North still beats strong." Mira squared her shoulders, the silver scar on her palm pulsing with a warm, steady rhythm. The shield was going to the wall. The walk to the battlements was the longest of Mira's life. She wore the same simple wool tunic, but Lyra had fastened a thick silver wolf clasp, the symbol of the Blackwood house, at her shoulder. It felt like the weight of the kingdom. The bond with Alden was a quiet, steady hum in her mind. He was stable, asleep, healing. She drew strength from that constant connection. She emerged onto the wind-swept wall walk beside Lyra. Below, in the misty morning light, 50 Sunfire soldiers stood in crisp formation. Before them, on a sleek black horse, was Lady Ilara. Her sharp face was tilted up, a predatory smile on her lips. Silas was letting his strategist deliver the blow. "Princess Lyra," Ilara called excellently, her voice carrying easily, "we come under parley to inquire after the health of King Alden. Rumors fly in a siege. We heard a distressing tale of a sudden illness." So they knew, or strongly suspected, the poisoner had gotten a message out. Lyra stepped forward. "The king is well and deeply occupied with the defense of his realm. You may take your concerns back to your master." Ilara's smile didn't waver. Occupied? How unusual not to see him on such a lovely, tense morning. And who is this? Her gaze, like a shard of ice, landed on Mira. The scullery maid turned bride. Do the common folk of Ironwood kneel to a laundress now? A hot wave of anger, both her own and a ripple from the sleeping Alden, surged through Mira. She stepped up to the battlement, placing her hands on the cold stone. She did not shout. She let her voice, clear and firm, carry on the still air. "I am Mira Blackwood," she said, the name feeling both foreign and right. "Bound to your king by the moon's grace. You stand before the walls of my home, Lady Ilara. You may address me as Your Grace, or you may return to your camp in silence. Choose." A murmur of surprise, then approval, rippled through the Ironwood soldiers along the wall. They had seen her stand with their king. They had seen the silver scar, and now they heard her voice, holding the authority of the castle. Ilara's face finally faltered, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. "Very well, Your Grace. My Alpha is concerned. A fragile new bond, a king taken ill. It speaks of instability. The treaty requires a stable sovereign. Perhaps we should renegotiate the terms, given the changing circumstances." This was the threat, laid bare. Your king is weak, your bond is a sham. Surrender more, or we attack. Mira felt Lyra tense beside her. This was the moment. She closed her eyes for a second, focusing on the bond. She thought of Alden's strength, his resolve, the unyielding mountain of his spirit. She pulled that feeling into herself, letting it fill her voice. "The only circumstance that has changed, Lady Ilara, is that the North now has two hearts beating as one. The bond is not fragile. It is forged in a fire older than your house. The king's health is his own concern, not a subject for negotiation with those who would poison from the shadows." Ilara's eyes widened almost imperceptibly at the mention of poison. Mira had scored a hit. "As for the treaty," Mira continued, her voice gaining power, "it stands. You have your lumber, your mines. The sovereign heart is under our protection. If your Alpha fears instability, it is the instability of a hawk that has missed its strike. You may withdraw." It was a direct dismissal, a queen dismissing an envoy. The Ironwood guards straightened, hands on weapons, emboldened by her unwavering stance. Ilara's face was a mask of cold fury. She had come to exploit weakness and found a unified front. The scullery maid was proving to be made of stern stuff. "You speak boldly for one so new to a crown. Remember, crowns can be removed, and bonds can be broken." "This one cannot," Mira said, raising her right hand, palm out. The morning sun caught the silver crescent scar, making it gleam. A collective intake of breath came from both sides of the wall. It was a silent, powerful rebuttal. Ilara saw it. She saw the resolve in Mira's face, the support from Lyra, the rallied guards. The probe had failed. The weakness they sought to exploit was not there. "We will take your words to Alpha Vance," she said stiffly. "He will be most interested." She wheeled her horse, signaling a retreat, but the treaty in their orderly retreat was palpable. As they disappeared into the mist, a cheer erupted from the Ironwood guards, a short, sharp, defiant sound. They were cheering for her, for their queen. Lyra let out a long, shaky breath and clapped a hand on Myra's shoulder. "By the old gods, sister, you sounded just like him." Myra's knees felt weak now that the adrenaline was fading. The connection to Alden flared with a warm pulse of pride and gratitude that was definitely not her own. He was awake, and he had felt it all. "I had a good teacher," Myra whispered, looking towards the keep where her king, her husband, was recovering. But as they descended from the walls, the victory felt hollow. They had won the morning, but the poisoner was still free. Silas was still out there, and her father was still a prisoner. The most dangerous battles, she realized, were not fought on walls with words, but in the silent shadowed corridors of trust and betrayal, and those battles were far from over. The victory on the walls was bittersweet ash in Myra's mouth. As the cheers faded, the cold reality settled deeper. Olden was awake but weak, propped up in his bed as Lyra and Myra reported. His storm-gray eyes, though clouded with residual fatigue, burned with a sharp analytical light as they recounted Alara's visit. "You handled her perfectly," he said, his voice a rough whisper. The pride flowing through the bond was a warm, steadying current. "You gave no ground, you showed strength where they expected fracture." He looked from Myra to Lyra. "But the fracture is still here, inside our walls. This poisoner, they are the knife at our back while Silas holds the sword to our front." "My father is not the knife," Myra said, quietly but firmly. She placed the draft of his plea on the bedside table. "He was a broken tool Silas discarded. The real threat is someone who believes in Vance's cause or someone he owns completely, someone with access, who knows the castle routines." Agnes, the healer, bustled in with more tea. "The lily root is working, sire. The weakness will linger for days, but the fog is lifting. The poison was calculated to incapacitate, not to kill swiftly." "A strategic poisoning," Lyra mused, pacing, "to create chaos for an attack. But we didn't chaos. We unified." She stopped, her eyes narrowing. "Unless the attack wasn't meant from outside." The room went still. Alden's gaze sharpened. "An inside strike, during the confusion of my illness, an assassination, or the opening of a gate." The horrifying simplicity of it struck them all. A distracted castle, a queen under suspicion, a princess scrambling, the perfect cover for a single deadly act. "We have to find them, today," Myra said. Her mind, the archivist's mind, began piecing fragments. The servant with the linen basket was seen but not recognized. That implies they either altered their appearance or they are not a regular servant. They had access to a southern poison, and they knew the king would drink wine alone in his chambers last night. Who would know that? "Anyone who knows his habits," Lyra sighed. "He often takes a final cup after strategic meetings. Last night, after the cell, it was predictable." "Then we look for someone with knowledge, access, and a motive that isn't just gold," Alden said, pushing himself up with effort. "Someone with a deeper loyalty to Vance, or a deeper grievance against me." A name hung unspoken in the air. Lady Selene, the noblewoman who offered Alden a political marriage on the battlements, the viper Lyra had spoken of. She had motive, spurned ambition. She had access. Her status allowed her freedom in the keep. Could she have gotten the poison? Possibly, through southern trade connections her merchant father maintained. "It's too obvious," Lyra muttered, as if reading the thought. "Selene is ambitious, not stupid. She wouldn't dirty her own hands. But she might know who would." An idea, dangerous and clear, formed. "We need to flush the snake into the open. We have to make the poisoner think their plan is working just from a different angle." Alden looked at her, a spark of understanding in his eyes. "A deception. We announce that the king's condition has worsened. We say the poison was more potent than thought. We create a spectacle of grief and panic. Lyra takes visible command, but appears overwhelmed. I am confined to my tower, despondent, the bond supposedly causing me shared agony." "And we watch," Lyra finished, a grim smile touching her lips. "We watch who moves, who tries to get a message out, who gets careless." It was a risk. It would spread fear among their own people, but it was a risk they had to take. The unseen enemy was a rot, and it had to be cut out before Silas launched his real attack. The performance began within an hour. Agnes left the royal chambers with a deeply worried face, whispering to guards. Lyra's commands on the walls became sharper, more frantic. A solemn locked-door silence fell over the king's wing. Myra played her part from the east tower. She had the guards deliver a single meal, which she barely touched. She let herself be seen at the window, her face drawn and pale, staring blankly at the Sunfire camp. The bond, however, hummed with a secret shared purpose. Alden, growing stronger by the hour in his guarded room, was a quiet well of focused energy in her mind. They were connected in the lie, partners in the trap. The day crawled by. Myra felt the anxiety of the castle like a physical pressure. Whispers in the corridors, the hurried steps of guards, the palpable fear. Through the bond she felt Alden's anxiety, his anger at being confined, his trust in her and Lyra's plan. As dusk fell, the bait was taken. Lyra burst into the tower, her eyes alight. "We have them. A stable boy, young, scared. He was trying to sneak out the postern gate by the midden heap. He had this." She tossed a tiny, hollowed-out acorn on Myra's table. Inside was a rolled slip of paper with a single coded character. "The signal for objective achieved, await next order," Lyra translated. "My men are tracking him back to his master. He's leading us right to them." "Who?" Myra breathed. "Not Celine," Lyra said, her face dark with a betrayal that cut deeper than politics. "He went to the chambers of Master Hollis, the castle steward." Master Hollis, a quiet, efficient, middle-aged man who had served Alden's father. He was part of the furniture of Ironwood, trusted completely with the provisioning, the servants' rolls, the daily minutiae of the keep. The man who would know every routine, every habit, who could place an unfamiliar face with a linen basket, who could access the king's chambers to tamper with wine. "Why?" Myra asked, stunned. "We're about to find out," Lyra said, drawing her knife. They moved swiftly, with a detachment of Lyra's most loyal guards. They found Master Hollis in his tidy office, calmly reviewing grain inventories. He looked up as they entered, his expression one of mild surprise that froze into a mask of eerie calm as they saw their faces. "Princess? Your Grace? To what do I owe the honor?" "The acorn, Hollis, the stable boy, the white frost lily. Explain." Hollis set down his quill. He didn't deny it, he simply deflated. The efficient mask fell away, revealing a face etched with a bitter, old resentment. "Why? For my daughter," he said, his voice hollow. "She married a Sunfire trader. She lives in Vance's capital. When the war turned, he took her, as assurance of my cooperation. He promised she would be safe, treated well if I served him, if I gave him the keys to Ironwood from the inside. A spy not for ideology, but for love, the oldest, most terrible leverage." Myra's heart ached even as her revulsion grew.
"The poison was to weaken the king for an assassin?" Lyra demanded. Hollis shook his head. "No, to weaken him for the claim. Vance's sorcerers believe a weakened alpha, his spirit low, is more vulnerable to the core sanguinis curse, even with the bond. The marriage was a setback, not a defeat in their eyes. They wanted the king frail, doubtful, his connection to the land and his new queen strained. Then, when Vance invoked the claws again with a new ritual, the magic might slip through." He looked at Mira with a terrible pity. "Your bond is strong. I could feel its rightness. It made my task harder, but a father's bond is strong too." The complexity of the plot was dizzying. It was never just about armies or signatures. It was a multi-layered assault on every front: military, legal, magical, and now psychological. "Where is your daughter now?" Mira asked. "I don't know," Hollis whispered, a tear finally tracing a path through his neat beard. "I was a fool. I see that now. I traded one family for another, and I have lost both." The guards took him away, his resignation complete. The immediate threat was neutralized, but Hollis's confession revealed a terrifying truth. Silas had not given up on claiming the Blackwood bloodline. The magical war was still active. Mira and Lyra returned to Alden. He was standing by the window now, his color better. They told him everything. Alden, Alden said, the name a sigh of disappointment. So the knife is pulled, but the sword is still poised, and now we know Silas still seeks a magical path to my heirs. He looked at Mira, his gaze intense. The bond, it is our strongest shield, but is it enough? Mira thought of her grandmother's journal, of the ancient magic. The texts said the land protects the dyad. We are not just two people, we are the heart of the North. Perhaps the shield needs to become a weapon. Perhaps we need to not just defend, but assert. A slow, understanding smile touched Alden's lips, the first true smile she had seen from him. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines, lighting the storm in his eyes. And Alpha and his Luna do not hide behind walls. They stand together on the ramparts and howl defiance so the world trembles. The plan that formed then was audacious. It was not about hiding weakness, but proclaiming strength. It was not about waiting for an attack, but defining the terms of the final confrontation. Tomorrow, at noon, they would not wait for Silas. They would summon him. Dawn broke clear and cold, a brittle, beautiful winter day. The word spread through Ironwood Keep like a cleansing wind. The king was recovering, the poisoner was caught, and the queen would stand with the king on the walls at noon. A different energy coursed through the castle, not the fear of siege, but the fierce anticipation of a reckoning. Mira dressed not in servant's wool, but in a gown of deep forest green that belonged to Alden's mother. It was simple but elegant, and it fit as if it were her own. Lyra herself braided Mira's dark hair, weaving in a slender silver chain, a gesture of silent, solid sisterhood. When Mira entered the king's antechamber, Alden was waiting. He wore his fighting leathers, but over them the ceremonial black and silver fur mantle of the Alpha. He looked every inch the Mountain King, strength restored, his eyes clear and sure. He held out his hand. She took it. The moment their palms touched, the silver scars flared with a warm, visible light that filled the room. The bond was not just a quiet hum now, it was a resonant chord, thrumming with shared purpose. They were not just two people bound by magic, they were a united front. "Ready?" he asked, his thumb brushing over her scar. "With you, always," she replied, and meant it with her whole soul. Together they walked through the keep. Servants bowed, guards saluted, not just to their king, but to their queen. The respect in their eyes was no longer born of protocol, but of witnessing her courage on the wall, her resilience through poison and betrayal. She had earned her place beside him. They ascended to the highest central battlement, overlooking the main gate and the Sunfire camp beyond. The entire castle garrison was visible on the walls, and in the courtyard below, every soul who could stand had gathered. Lyra stood a pace behind them, a proud and fierce sentinel. As the sun reached its zenith, Alden did not wait. He raised a horn to his lips and blew a long, low note that echoed across the silent valley. It was a challenge, a summons. For long minutes nothing happened. Then movement in the Sunfire camp. A contingent emerged, larger than before, with Silas Vance himself at its head, mounted on a white stallion. They halted just beyond bowshot. Silas's face was a study of controlled fury and curiosity.
"Blackwood," Silas called. "You look remarkably well for a dying man. Has your little wife learned healing arts along with treason?" Alden's voice, amplified by the natural acoustics of the wall and his own alpha power, rolled out like thunder, needing no shout. "The only sickness in the North, Silas, was your corruption. It has been purged. You are no longer welcome at our gates. You will break camp. You will take your army, and you will leave our lands. Today." Silas laughed, but it was strained. "Or what? You will throw more words at me? Your army is still outnumbered. Your people are still hungry." Our people, Mira spoke then, her voice clear and ringing beside Alden's, are fed by their loyalty. Their strength is our strength. You sought to break us with poison, with spies, with cursed contracts. You have failed. The sovereign heart of the North does not beat in a parchment clause. It beats here. She placed her hand over her own heart, then gestured to Alden, and finally swept her arm to encompass the people on the walls and in the courtyard below. It beats in us, all of us. You cannot claim what is already owned by its people. Her words ignited something. A low growl started among the guards, picked up by the people below, a deep, resonant sound of unity. It was the voice of the North. Silas's face contorted. Pretty speeches. I have 3,000 men ready to storm your walls. And you will lose half of them, Lyra shouted, stepping forward, and the world will know you as the oath-breaker who attacked a peacefully resolved treaty. Your allies will abandon you. Your own people will question a king who spends lives for a grudge. Alden raised his and Mira's joined hands high. The noonday sun struck the silver scars, and they blazed with a light so brilliant it was seen by every soul in the valley, a beacon of pure ancient magic. The moon's grace is upon us, Silas. The land itself recognizes the dyad. Your claim is ash. Your war is over. Leave now with the scraps of dignity you have left, or be remembered only as the fool who challenged the heart of the North and was broken upon it. The display of unity, of magic, of unwavering defiance was the final blow. Mira could see it in the postures of the Sunfire soldiers. They saw a strong king, a fierce queen, a united castle, and a cause that had crumbled from a conquest into a personal vendetta. Superstition and doubt, those ancient enemies of armies, did the rest. Silas Vance sat rigid on his horse, isolated in his rage. He looked at the blazing symbols of the bond, at the defiant faces on the wall, at his own restless men. He had been outmaneuvered at every turn, in the hall, in magic, in diplomacy, and now in the theater of war. To attack now would be a bloody, costly, and ultimately futile massacre that would end his reign. With a sound of pure, strangled fury, he wrenched his horse's head around. He did not give a command, but the meaning was clear. The Sunfire contingent began to slowly, silently fall back towards their camp. The siege was breaking. A roaring cheer erupted from Ironwood Keep, a tidal wave of sound that chased the retreating enemy. Tears streamed down Mira's face, tears of relief, of pride, of a joy so profound it hurt. Alden pulled her to his side, his arm around her shoulders, holding her close as they watched the enemy turn away. Later, in the great hall that had once seen the near signing of their doom, a celebration began. It was not lavish, the stores were still low, but it was filled with a fervent, grateful joy. Ale was shared, stories were told of the brave queen on the wall, the clever archivist in the tower, the strong king who had endured. In a quiet moment, Alden led Mira to the throne dais. He did not sit. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. The noise of the hall seemed to fade away. "Mira Blackwood," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You entered my hall a stranger with a warning. You became my wife in a sacred rite. You stood as my shield against poison and lies. You spoke with the voice of my kingdom. You are not just the queen the North needed. You are the partner I did not know my soul was waiting for." He lifted her marked hand to his lips, kissing the silver scar. "The bond chose us, but my heart chooses you every day from now until the last. I love you." The words, so simple, so profound, unlocked a final chamber in Mira's heart. She had offered duty, then partnership, then love had grown unbidden and fierce in the space between.
She looked into his stormy eyes, now calm and clear and full of a devotion that mirrored her own. "Alden Blackwood," she whispered, her tears flowing freely now. "I came seeking to redeem a name. I found a purpose. I found a home. I found a man whose strength is matched only by his honor, and whose heart is the greatest kingdom I could ever hope to serve. I love you." He leaned his forehead against hers, the bond singing between them, a perfect, harmonious note of mutual love and respect. It was no longer a chain of necessity, but a ribbon of choice, beautifully, irrevocably tied. In the weeks that followed, the Sunfire Army became a dust cloud on the southern horizon. Spring finally began to whisper at the edges of the winter frost. Mira, with Lyra's hearty endorsement, secured a pardon for her father, Ronan. His past crimes were not forgotten, but his final act of sacrifice and his daughter's service earned him exile instead of execution. He left for a distant monastery, his eyes clear with a peace he never known in years, finally free of his chains. One evening, as the first true stars of spring pierced the twilight, Alden and Mira stood on their battlement, the same place they had faced down Silas. The land below was quiet, at peace. His arm was around her, her head resting on his shoulder. The bond was a quiet, joyful hum. "The sovereign heart is safe," he murmured into her hair. Mira smiled, placing her hand over his heart, feeling its strong, steady beat beneath her palm and echoing in her soul. "No, my love," she corrected softly, looking up at him in eyes full of a future they would build together. "The sovereign heart is just beginning." The end.